Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Today's guest is John H. Davis. He is a 10-year Army veteran who joined in 2008, found a passion for education throughout his time in service. And then whenever he got out, he decided to go and use his GI Bill at St. Joseph's College for history, and then went on to Harvard to get a master's in education. During that transition, during that time, he found that the speed bumps that he was experiencing being a transitioning soldier to a civilian life and what he went through getting his education, he said, you know what? I think I'm going to write a book about this. So he did. And the name of the book is Combat to College. And John is now joining the Scuttlebutt to talk about the book, talk about his journey, talk about tips and tricks that he has for veterans who are looking to use their GI Bill and get an education after their service. We talk not only about that, but what it means to continue your service to your country after you have served. John has a great website with lots of information on it and a blog that we talk about. I hope that you enjoy the conversation with him today. I certainly did. And please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. And if you've been with the Scuttlebutt for some time, thank you for supporting the podcast. We are fast approaching 100 episodes, and it's been an absolute joy throughout every single one of these episodes and meeting all of these guests and covering all of the topics that we do. And if you're joining us for the very first time, please check back on all of the episodes that we have had prior to this one. We've come a long way, and I hope that you find something within our history of the podcast that would pique your interest. You can always reach me at Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Always interested to hear your thoughts, your comments, and if you have suggestions for future podcasts, I'm always open ears about that. So thank you so much and enjoy the show. John Davis, super excited to have you a part of the Scuttlebutt today. Thank you so much for joining the program. I'm really excited to dive into your book. Love for you to introduce yourself.
Psyched to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me on. So I grew up in the great state of Iowa. We call it heaven here, though, and joined the military after high school. And well, after high school, I actually drifted into community college because that's what you're supposed to do. But when I was that age, I was far more interested in girls and alcohol than going to class. And eventually that led me into the military, where I I felt like I thrived there in the team environment that I was so used to playing sports growing up. And after the military, I did 10 years as an infantryman in the Army. And after the military, my first stop again was college. And when I got to college, I kind of landed into a really good position where I was in a military friendly college, and I got a job helping other student veterans. And that really opened my eyes to wanting to help student veterans kind of where they're at, because so many veterans go to college right after they leave service, and a lot of them don't make it all the way through. So I wanted to write a book to help veterans get there. And that led me into veteran advocacy, where I've spoken to Congress. I did my master's at Harvard, and now I'm writing full time, helping other veterans through different therapies.
There's a lot in there. There's many, many years of teaching and learning throughout. And we're going to get to your book, Combat to College. Interested in the tips that you provide in the book. And not only that, but how you relate to veterans who are going to be seeking post-service education. But let's take a step back real quick. Community college, you mentioned in the very beginning of your book, so no spoilers here, that you fail out of 2 community colleges before entering the military?
Yep. So I failed out of community college. And it's funny because I talk about, I failed out of community college, but now I have a master's degree from Harvard, because the military ingrained in me those skills and disciplines to be successful in the classroom that I didn't have pre-military. So I was always kind of looking for challenges in my life. And I think that's what leads a lot of people into the military, is looking for challenges. But I wasn't really challenged, at least not in the right way, initially when I went to college. I just wasn't passionate about learning or anything like that. And then the military, what I loved about the military was training soldiers. I was a military instructor. And since then, I've taught everything from American Ninja Warrior. I taught English for a little bit in Thailand. I've taught incarcerated youth when I was working on my bachelor's degree. So I've really got into the whole concept of teaching and learning as just, I think it's such a beautiful process.
Was military even on your radar, though, at that point? Did you come from a military family, or was it just like, okay, this is an option?
I think, after you graduate high school, you kind of got three options. You got college, the military, or workforce. And college obviously didn't work out for me. And whatever job I was going to get as a 18 or 19-year-old community college dropout was probably not going to be something I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So the military kind of seemed like a good fit at the time. And it was more, I didn't really know anything about the military. Like I went there and just kind of signed up for the army. And then a month later, I was in basic training. 3 months later, I was in Afghanistan. So kind of
Wow.
like just thrown right into it, which, I like the trial by fire situation anyway. So it worked out well for me.
And why did you choose Army? Because you just walked into the recruiter and that's what happened, or was there a reason that you selected them?
It was between the Army and the Marines for me. And I
Hmm.
went in, I think it was just I like the Army recruiter more. The Marine recruiter, I walked in there kind of, timid. And it was the Marine recruiter. I was like, hey, I'm interested in joining the Marines. He goes, why the hell do we want you? And I felt like he's a little aggressive, that kind of Marine mentality, which I think works for some people. But me at the time, I was like, I'm not so sure about this guy. And the Army guy is like, let me tell you about how we'll pay for your college. And the Marine guy was more like, a little bit more intense, which
Yeah.
I think is kind of says a lot about the Marines.
And what year was this?
This was 2008.
Okay, so surge time.
Yeah, so my first deployment is 2010. It took me like a little bit to ship out for basic training, but yeah, so I was in there for the surge.
Was there a culture shock when you entered? Was there, like, oh, like I don't know, I didn't know I was signing up for this, or were you sort of expecting it?
It's a big transition, I think, for anyone. I think every military person kind of divides their life into, three lives. You have your pre-military life, you have your military life, and your post-military life. I think, and how we deal with those transitions, determines our level of success. So when I first got in there, my thing was I met a lot of my platoon in Afghanistan because they literally I put me on a plane, sent me straight there when I got to Fort Campbell, Tennessee, and kind of in kind of proving myself quickly on a team kind of proved difficult because these guys have been together for a year. And I was kind of one of those, last attachments to kind of get put on to beef up numbers right beforehand.
Right.
And I think it was more a learning curve as far as the military and tactics go, because the first time I fired a 50 cals in combat, I was in a truck, didn't know what I was doing, so it was kind of trial by fire all the way through.
You mentioned learning curve, and I feel like that's sort of the theme of this episode today. Um, did you have a mentor as going into the military? Was there something, if you were, there had to have been some early value that you had for education, so there might have been mentors that you were looking up to and learning from as you entered. How did that go?
My grandfather was in the military just after World War II, and he was part of
Hmm.
the occupation force for Germany.
Okay.
And he told me at the time, because he was, I grew up without a father, so I was a little closer to him. He told me, well, the military straightened you out. And at the time, I definitely needed to be straightened out. And he says, when they mean 8 o'clock, God damn it, they mean 8 o'clock. There's no messing around about that. So I think that kind of helped me. And I always grew up with kind of a love for reading, but not a love for education. I
Hmm.
loved reading science fiction books. I love reading, Lord of the Rings type books and all those, types of stuff. I loved
Yeah.
Harry Potter when I was a kid. So
Hmm.
I loved reading, but not necessarily learning. But I had to find ways to connect the two because obviously, I'm a big fan of books and learning now.
And in the military, what mentors did you look up to? In basic, all the way through into Afghanistan.
And that's what's amazing about the military is you have this built-in kind of mentorship program that goes all the way through it. No matter where you're at, there's someone in charge of you, and you're usually in charge of someone else. So you always have someone to guide you. And then when veterans get into the civilian world, that kind of guidance slips away, and it's
Hmm.
hard to know what to do. And I think that's what adds to a lot of the transition stress that veterans face. But I would say in the military, I had so many different mentors and people that contributed. I had my first company commander who really took kind of a liking to, I think, my work ethic because I was a big gym guy at the time. So we go to the gym together and things like that. And I think that he gave me kind of some decent advice that I passed on to other soldiers. He said, there's three rules here. First rule is look good. Second rule is know what you're doing. And third rule, if you don't know what you're doing, look like you know what you're doing. And I kind of, put that into my life. And I was like, that's, I'll live by that. It's like, if you're not first, you're last. I'll live by that motto for the next few years.
Right. Oh, excellent. So mentioning transition and, I would love to dive more into just your service, and maybe we'll touch on more of that as we go along here. But more specifically, okay, you transitioned civilian to military life, military to civilian life. What was the transition back like for you, and where did you see hiccups and speed bumps along the way that you were like, this is a no go for me. I'm going to try to make this better for everyone else.
I really struggled with my initial transition because I was so used to having someone kind of there to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when there wasn't anyone there to tell me what to do, I kind of did nothing. So much of my identity was in the military. The military kind of carves this deep identity into you over years of service. And then when that falls away, you don't really know who you are. I think
Can I
that
can I interrupt real quick?
Go ahead.
What is that identity?
The military identity?
Yeah, like what's that identity that they carve into you?
I would say it's an identity to where you're part of a team and you have a higher mission. So those two concepts. And when in the civilian world, one, it's a more individualistic civilian world now, so you're not really part of a team. And two, nobody really hands you, a folder with life mission stamped on it. The military provides your purpose for you. It's built into the whole thing. There's a value system, there's creeds to follow, there's guidelines, there's mentors. It's an entire culture. I always tell people nothing is as all encompassing as the military is in your life. The military is a 24/7 dominating force. There's not another profession that has that kind of, you know, entire control over your life.
Other than parenthood.
Well, that could be true. That could be
Yeah,
true. I'm not
it's a
I'm not saying
military, and it's my 2-year-old.
right. They are a little more dominating than any military force could ever be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say, a lot of the people in charge of me in the military and the people around were probably about as mature as a 2-year-old sometimes.
I've heard that.
That's what, yeah. A lot of people are kind of sold on the idea the military is the absolute best of the best. And that's not really true. We can admit that not everyone in the military is, top caliber type person,
Mhm.
but everyone's in there with a higher mission and on a team. And I think that the military can really uplift you into the person that you can be. And the hard part is maintaining that in the civilian world.
That leads me right to the next question. How did it uplift you? Because if it wasn't about education prior to the military, how did it become about education during your service?
It's so easy to look at the downsides of the military. I think that's what a lot of people focus on is the negative aspects that you get from your military service. But we forget about the upside to it. Like at first I looked at my military experiences, especially when I was transitioning to college, as a disadvantage because I was like, okay, well, I'm 30 now and everyone else here is 19. I feel out of place. I feel isolated. And, I'm struggling a little bit mentally. I have some physical issues, at the time. I was struggling pretty bad with headaches, back pain, PTSD, and things like that. I was on sleeping medication. So easy to look at all these things like they were a huge disadvantage to me. And it took me a little bit of being at college and working with other student veterans to figure out the military mindset was actually, an asset in the classroom. I mean, like mentioned earlier, you know how to be on time, which is probably one of the most essential aspects of being a successful adult is just being on time, the right place, the right uniform type stuff.
Right.
I remember my first week in college, I got to one of my classes and I got there 15 minutes early, like you're supposed to do in the military, because, 15 minutes early is on time and on time is late.
Yep.
So then I'm sitting there in the classroom looking at my watch and time goes by, and nobody comes in. I'm like, am I in the wrong room on the first day? Like, this is not a good start. So then, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And eventually some people start coming in, and over half the class came in late on the very first day, which is just an unforgivable sin in military culture. I mean,
Yeah.
that reputation would stick with you, forever if you were late on the first day. But that's what college is. And me being able to be on time, sit in front, look professional, really set me out from my peers and made me more of a more mature student than the students around me.
And I want to get to this first story that you mentioned in the book. Um, was that also you mentioned this thing about yelling at a fellow classmate? You were like, very much in the military mindset. You just started, first class. Like
Hmm.
there was, you're watching these like teenagers walk in. You feel like you're double the age of them, double, triple the maturity. Different life experiences. Tell me a bit about that, more about that first day.
Yeah, but by the time you get to school, you're as a, a student veteran, you're not a traditional student. Chances are you're older. Student veterans are more likely to have families, more likely to require employment. There's so much more that goes into being a student veteran than just your traditional high school kid. But my first class, the first thing you do is you go around the room, you introduce yourself and everything. And the kid sitting next to me before me, I'm sitting there. I have my assault pack, and it still had like military patches and stuff on it. I don't call it a backpack. I call it an assault pack. And I'm sitting there, and pretty much all my clothes are military related because all I had was military themed t-shirts and uniforms when I got out of the military. And so I can't really downplay my veteran status. I still shave my head and stuff like that. I have all these military tattoos. And the kid next to me on his laptop, he's got a big sticker that says Bush did 9/11, which was kind of a red flag at first, but I'm sitting there, and so I give my introduction. My name's John. I just got out of the army, blah, blah, blah. And kind of that's it. And the next kid goes, and then after he gets done with his introduction, kind of as an afterthought, and he said, and I do want to say to the class, I don't look down on John for serving in the military. And I was like, at the time, the whole class was kind of silent, and I lost my shit. I
Yeah.
was just ready to kill this kid
Hmm.
because, I mean, one, yelling is perfectly appropriate in the military. It's just a part of what it is, and so is cursing. However, these things are not acceptable in the college classroom, which I quickly found out as, a few hours later, I'm talking to the guidance counselor about how you can't threaten to murder students in
This is the
college.
part in the book that we missed. This we only got the yelling. We didn't get the guidance
Yeah.
counselor story.
Then the guidance counselor and I got to be friends because, my first week I struggled a little bit, yelled at a professor even. So it's one of those things where it's hard to transition and kind of leave the military identity behind, especially when veterans are used to things like yelling and cursing and dark humor.
Right.
I remember I had a professor ask me this day after class. I'd been in the infantry my entire career, so it was hard to kind of break out of that. And the professor said, "Hey, John, I love your contributions, but you have to watch the language." And I said, "I don't. What do you mean?" And they're like, "You said the F word like 3 times today. You can't do that." And I was like,
Mm,
"Oh my god, I didn't even realize that. I didn't even
yeah.
realize I was saying it. It's just like a filler." So there's some things that we need to leave in the military, and some things we need to take forward. Some of our military habits are good, like showing up early. Some military habits like yelling and cursing, maybe leave that behind.
It's so interesting. This is a sidebar conversation that could lead us out a very different rabbit hole, so we won't dive into it. But in our time at VBC, we have World War II vets, Korean vets, Vietnam vets, post 9/11 vets. But I will say that the post 9/11 vets swear way more than like the Korean World War II and Vietnam vets. It's like, no, we didn't swear back in World War II, but like now it's like you said, it's just filler. It's just like something that is part of the vernacular while you're talking and, on base or behind the wire.
Yeah, I don't think a military brief or class has ever gotten done without quite a bit of cursing.
Right.
So I think that society has probably gotten more impolite over time. Back then, World War II, they were still, a little more respectful
Yeah.
gentlemen than we
Right.
are
A
today.
little more gentlemanly.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so that's interesting. Like changing your identity, finding that new identity in the military, and then coming into you're back. You're at St. Joseph's. You're getting
Yeah,
your
in New
your
York.
bachelor's, right? Your bachelor's in history.
Mhm.
Why did you decide on history? That you came out and you said, okay, I'm going to get an education now. First question would be, did you think back on your time at the community colleges and sort of the failures that you experienced there? Were you confident though going into St. Joseph's, like I'm a new me, I'm going to get this done?
I was actually, I think, more frightened at the time because, I didn't really care when I was 18. But when I was going to school, that was kind of, a lot of veterans go to college like, this is it. This is where I'm putting all my eggs into this basket. And if
Mm-hmm.
that didn't work out for me, I didn't really know what I would do. And that's why I think I ended up so successful in college, ended up going to Harvard and all those things because I took my classroom experience as serious as a military mission.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, it really just changed the game to where I took this dedication into the classroom that other students just didn't have.
Yeah.
So it was more just my commitment, maybe even over commitment to education that really helped set me up for success. I chose history because initially I was thinking I wanted to be a teacher because that was what I loved about the military was teaching and training. So I went to my undergrad for to be a history teacher.
And how did you select St. Joseph's?
That was just the school that was closest to where I was living when I got out. My last year and a half, I did as a army recruiter.
and you mentioned they was St. Joseph's a vet friendly college.
Yeah, so
So
they had a
what can you define that for me?
yeah, so they had like that's when I talk to veterans, it's not only about that you're going to school, you also have to put some thought into what school you're going to go to.
Hmm.
And it really just made my college career that I went to a school that already had an established Student Veterans of America program. They had an entire Student Veterans Lounge, a room set up at the school just for us,
Hmm.
where we had, big screen TV. There's some cute computers in there, coffee machine, and veterans could go
But we,
connect with
all that.
connect with other veterans, eat, whatever. And then looking back, I'm not sure if they put all the veterans like away from most of the students so they didn't have to see us, see the cursing and stuff like that, or if they were really trying to help us, but the result's the same. And then they also had a VA work study program there. So a
Mm.
lot of colleges now have VA work study programs, and that's when student veterans get jobs on campus. So I had a job helping other student veterans, and my job was kind of everything student veteran related. I would give tours of incoming veterans to the college. I would certify their benefits, make sure they're getting their money on time for books and things like that. And this led to me making a list, and I called it, because I'm so creative, I called it John's College Tips. And I gave it out, and there was like 10 of them. And eventually those tips morphed into the chapters of my book, because
Mm.
it would just point student veteran to the resources that they needed to do to be successful in this college.
That's great, and it's also we've talked with like here in Pittsburgh where I'm recording from, we have Pitt, and they have the same thing, an office for veterans, to go and just be around other veterans, have that sort of
Mhm.
camaraderie, have that sort of same maturity level, that same language. We had also on the Scuttlebutt last season Penn State. Penn State has a really great veteran friendly office. They're doing the same thing, just offering an area where veterans can congregate and talk and share, tips and anything really. And a lot of the veterans that we had on that program said the only reason I went to Pitt is because they have this program, this this ability for me to be with other people that understand what I've been through.
Yeah, and you miss that camaraderie. I mean, that's what you miss
Mm-hmm.
from the military, is the opportunity to be around like-minded people. So yeah, I think that's awesome, because there you can better forge kind of a post-military identity, which, every veteran kind of has who they were before the military, which just doesn't exist anymore because the military transforms you, and you have who you are in the military, but you can't be who you were in the military in the civilian world. Just doesn't really work, different context.
Right.
So if you're around other veterans, you can kind of take that journey together, because it is a transition that with no really clear endpoint when you got out of the military. It's not like you get out of the military, take uniform off, and suddenly you're a civilian again. A lot of people kind of spend time hovering between both worlds, to where they're really not in the military but don't feel comfortable as civilian. And that leads to kind of, an isolation type thing, which is not good for veterans. Because the military is not really, it's not a job, it's kind of more of a calling. If you look at the military like a job, honestly, it's kind of a terrible job. I mean, they don't pay you very good. They the food is terrible. They send you places where people try to kill you. It's not a super great job. The conditions are terrible.
Yeah, you don't get to
Um,
shower like for
yeah,
weeks on
it's
end. It's yeah.
yes. There are a lot of aspects to it that are not great. You have to go spend Christmases overseas, all those
Mm-hmm.
things. So if you're around other veterans, you can really feel that kind of camaraderie that you miss from the military. So yeah, I think that, in my book, I talk about, it's not only about that you're going to school, it's also picking the right school and program for you. But college also is a place where, if you don't know what to do, which a lot of veterans don't know what to do when they're getting out, college is a good place to figure that out. And it gives you some time to kind of transform. A lot of veterans are like, I don't want to go to school because I don't know what I want to do.
Right.
Well, you can figure that at school, because the worst thing to do is to do nothing for veterans. And so college provides a good place to where you have these benefits. You might as well use them, and you can kind of go through a period of self discovery again, just like traditional students do when they go to school.
Uh, and maybe this is a meant for a deeper conversation as well. But how far does the GI Bill take you? I mean, you did your undergraduate St. Joseph's, you did masters at Harvard. Did the GI Bill take you the whole way, or for
Yeah,
anybody
my
maybe
JLB
listening to the Scuttlebutt
Yeah,
for the
my
first
JLB
time?
took me the whole
Right.
way. So, I
Oh,
mean, you
great.
do have to game plan a little bit if you want additional school, and they have ways that you can extend it through voc rehab. So if you have if you have a disability percentage, you can apply for voc rehab to get additional training.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are overly focused on traditional education for the GI Bill, but it'll pay for a lot of different things. So a lot of veterans now are using their GI Bills to get into more trades and apprenticeships and things like that because, as we know, I mean, welders make about 3 times as much as teachers do. So there's lots of things like that, and veterans are super great with hands-on experiential learning because that's what you do in the military. You can't learn how to shoot a rifle or do any military jobs, behind a desk with a book. A
Right.
lot of learning for veterans is good experientially. So there's so many of those programs to get into. I mean, you can use a GI Bill to go to scuba school, flight school, police academies, all those types of things. A huge varied amount of things. So if you do need to put some effort into game planning if you're looking to do something in higher education or master's or law degree or something like that.
Was that intimidating? Because you have so many options and you just got out and you're not quite sure where you're going or what you want to do. Was trying to figure out that specific place, that specific degree, was that intimidating?
I think that, you know, I thought history teacher kind of off the bat and getting a college degree was just something you needed to do that. I thought,
Okay.
that would work. And I grew up playing sports. So I thought, hey, I could go coach wrestling at the high school or something if I get a job doing that. So for me, history kind of worked because I absolutely love World War II history. I love Vietnam history. I had some relatives that were in Vietnam. So I think that for me, history just fit. But I don't think that veterans necessarily need to do, um, have that straight of a path. I think that, you can kind of go a little side to side or things like that. You don't necessarily need to be point A to point B because civilian life isn't really like that. The military is more linear to where you're just, you're here, you're here, you're here. You kind of understand career progression, and civilian life's a little more chaotic. A lot of people think
Certainly.
that, you know, the military is real complicated and civilian life is easy, but it's actually the opposite. If you watch Forrest Gump, he's like, I fit in the military real good because the drill sergeant, he says, "What do you do?" And then Forrest responds back, "I do whatever you tell me to, drill sergeant." He's like, and that's it. That's what the
Mhm.
military is. You wake up early, you make your bed, and you're going to be successful.
Um, do you think that college, in that same vein, is college harder than the army? Did you find it to be that way?
I think that when veterans get to college, a lot of times it is harder than the army and a little more complicated. I mean, like I mentioned before, you have to juggle a lot of different things. So
Hmm.
student veterans are always older. They usually need employment. On top of that, over 50% of student veterans have some type of service connected disability. And then by the time you get to college, most of the time you're moving across the country, you're transitioning out of the military, you're reforging your identity, and you're starting college again. So you put all that together and it's kind of a disaster. And you put on top of that, like you veterans are more likely to have families. You're more likely to have children. And that makes education a little more difficult as you balance different things. Whereas your traditional 18, 19-year-old student obviously has less distractions.
You took that 10, did you take that top 10 list and that's what became the book, Combat to College?
Yeah, so those my college trips that I made, eventually I was kind of running I was running the student veteran program at my
Mhm.
school, and we had so many student veterans in there, and I was kind of, eventually enough of them were like, dude, you should write a book about college. And at the time I was like, write a book, it kind of sounded weird at first. And then I looked at, my college tips and I wrote some paragraphs about them, why you need, like one of the chapters is, reach up and reach down, which means you should have a mentor and then be a mentor. Because that's one of the programs I started at my college was, hey, everyone mentors someone and everyone has a mentor. And that really made a big difference in the student veteran culture at my school to where we kind of had this, military themed mentorship program going on, and then that helps so many veterans that then eventually those paragraphs morph longer, and then I self-published the first book.
Also very Star Wars of you. It's always two.
I do like Star Wars. I think you gotta be a Padawan before you're a Jedi, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay, so somebody's coming to this podcast. They're like, I'm looking to figure out where I want to go for college. Why should I read your book, John?
So if you're looking at where you want to go for college, then you got to figure that out first. Well, my book is designed. I look at college as a bridge between the military and civilian worlds.
Mhm.
So many, first off, so many veterans who have the GI Bill don't take advantage of it. And so I'd like to give them the confidence to go to school. Secondly, a lot of the student veterans that start don't finish. Momentum really matters whether you're on the battlefield, life, or in college. If you build some momentum, you're good. And that's why student veterans that get through their first year are more likely to make it to graduation. So my book is really targeting people, it's kind of a narrow window, but that first year of school, if you make it through that, you're going to make it to the end, chances are. So if you read my book, it gives you the tips, the tricks, as well as strategies and stories. I wanted my book kind of be words from a friend. So it's not a
Mhm.
real tell you what to do book or preach at you or anything like that. There's a lot of relatable stories about my experiences and the people that I know experiences going to college, because the student veteran experience in school is different than traditional education. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because the book just didn't exist.
Right.
And so many of us start our civilian careers at college. And I wanted to meet veterans where they're at and help them where they're at. If you think about some of the statistics behind things, people with college degrees kill themselves less.
Mhm.
So if more veterans get college degrees, more veterans will have better economic futures, and chances are they'll do better mentally. There's two types of people in the military: officers and civilians. Two classes of people across all the branches. It's the exact same. Officers transition better out of the military. They struggle less with PTSD. They get divorced less. They kill themselves less, and they have better economic futures post military.
Mhm.
And these two groups of people essentially have the same college experience or the same military experiences. They eat the same food, they work on the same bases, same ships, and all those things. But officers do a hell of a lot better post service. And the big difference between those groups is the college degree,
Mhm.
traditionally.
Yeah, because you can go to college and come out of college and be an officer, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Can you share with us, without too many spoilers, some of the tips that are in the book?
Sure. So one of the tips that I tell veterans, which kind of goes against the veteran grain, is to sit in front. So if you sit in front in your classroom, like a military classroom, veterans a lot of times are more comfortable with your back to the wall, especially when you get out of the military. But in the military, you sit in front. You don't allow empty seats behind you in classrooms. And if you treat your military or your civilian class as like you did military classes, you're going to pay attention. So if you sit in front, you're going to pay attention. You're going to not worry about distractions. You're not going to worry about the other students texting on their phones or on Facebook on the computers or anything like that. You can pay attention to the class. So one thing I tell veterans is sit in front, in the middle,
Mhm. In
right up
front,
there.
be
Yeah.
present and be
Be present.
accountable.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's about being present in your classroom and making sure the professor knows who you are and all those things.
Hmm. Um, Talk a bit about going into St. Joseph's. I'm sure was a bit of a learning curve, like we talked
Mhm.
about. Going to Harvard's a different level.
Yeah.
Why choose Harvard, and why challenge yourself to that level?
Well, that's what I think, that it's easy for veterans when you get out of the military to stop pursuing challenges, because challenges and competition are just built into the military.
Hmm.
And then a lot of veterans, when they get out, they think, okay, my glory days, my challenges are behind me. And a lot of veterans think that even at like 22. I mean, I've met veterans who are, 22, 23, and they view their best years as behind them because their military experience with their friends and all that.
Yeah.
So, um, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, sure. It's going from St. Joseph's to Harvard
All right. Okay.
and like
So, yeah, for
challenging
me,
yourself in that way.
yeah, I grew up with cornfields in my backyard as a kid. So Harvard was as far as away as, it was like Hogwarts. Like it was just kind of, I didn't know anyone who went to Harvard, entirely new type of thing. And when I went to school, I was never really academically inclined growing up. And in college, when I got there, I was just getting straight A's, just blasting all the way through and really, really enjoying the process. And I was thinking at the time, okay, I got to go to grad school. I want to go to grad school. And my mother was like, apply to Harvard. And at the time, I kind of laughed at her and I was like, that sounds ridiculous, you know. And then I looked at it and I said, okay, I can apply for free. I mean, whatever. The worst they can do is say no. And that's why a lot of veterans, they stop themselves because they, they're a little, I don't want to say afraid of challenges,
Hmm.
but they think they're part of their challenging life is behind them. So I applied, I got in, I was a little thrown by that, but I was, obviously went there and graduated. So
Yeah. What
something
was it
worked
like
out.
getting that letter, that acceptance letter? That was.
It was pretty cool. It was a
Yeah.
cool it was very cool feeling. It felt like, um I kind of felt like I made it, I would
Hmm.
say, which, of course, but the acceptance letter is one thing, getting to the school and graduating is a different thing. But I was lucky I'd studied college and the school experience so much
Hmm.
that I went to Harvard, took the same military mentality in there, and was able to obviously make it through.
Is Harvard vet friendly as well?
No, not
Interesting.
really.
Okay, so let's talk about those differences. If it's vet's coming out, he's looking for a vet friendly place, but finds a not vet friendly college that he wants to go to, or he or her wants to go to. How do you choose? What do you
You have
do in
to
that case?
You have to create your own community.
Hmm.
So if there's not going to be a student veteran community at the school, you have to find other communities. A lot of veterans are kind of too attached to the idea of military communities. Oh, I need to, which is a good starting point, especially at colleges, because you understand those types of things. But then you have to find another community. So what I did is I found a fitness community at the college because that kind of, is like the military. So finding people who are into fitness to hang around with and all those things. I also joined the local VFW and American Legion there, kind of connected with older veterans.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a huge shift to go from being surrounded by veterans. I think I went to Harvard Graduate School of Education and there was, I think 600 people in there, only two veterans, me and one other guy.
Wow.
So
Now,
that was a much different experience, but I kind of looked at it, one of the tips in my book is called build put on your armor. So your
mhm,
support system is like your armor. But you have to put it on and maintain it.
right.
And in the military we're so used to support and a community around us that when we get out and it falls away, it's hard. But it just takes creating your own team. In the military, you don't get a choice who you serve with. I'm not served with a lot of people who would not be my first choice. And I had to work for a lot of people who I would prefer not to work for again in the future. But in your civilian life, you create your own team.
So that's the big difference. If someone's listening, is like, what's a not friendly veteran campus? It's that they just don't have an office for veterans. They don't have like support systems for veterans. It's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, every college will claim to be military friendly. If you go to their
Mhm.
website, it's going to be military friendly because they want that GI Bill money. Colleges are businesses now more than ever,
Right.
so they really want, and the GI Bill pays full tuition. There's no scholarships or anything like that, so they want those big checks. So they want you to go there, but at the same time, what you can do is look at one, graduation rates of that college, because if the college doesn't have good graduation rates, then you might not want to attend it. And two, if they have an active Student Veterans of America club or an active student veterans organizations there, anything like that, then it's a good idea. Colleges around military bases always have pretty strong military friendly things, which is, seems obvious, but that's kind of the way it goes. Um, but yeah, Harvard, not real military friendly as far as just because there are not many veterans there.
So you get your master's, but what's the next step? It's you get out. I know back when I graduated college, it was like, okay, well, I did it, but what do I do now?
That's another thing my book gets into is college is one of the best places in the world to network. A lot of veterans only put on their networking hat like once or twice a year. They put on their
Mhm.
suit, they go to a networking event. But college is, the military is a lot more what you know organization, and civilian world is more who you know. So in college provides an excellent place for veterans to find people and network and create opportunities for themselves post service. A lot of people get too wrapped up into the grades and educational aspect of college, but what you really get out of college is the ability to make your life successful post service, and most of that starts with networking and things like that. So my book encourages people to, volunteer, to join clubs, to get in different organizations that aren't only student veteran
Mhm.
organizations, take internships, study abroad, do everything you can to set yourself up for a successful life post service, because you don't want to just walk across a graduation stage like you mentioned. You'd be like, okay, now what? You should already have an idea,
Mhm.
and the time you should start playing that is your first day in college. Kind of like when you're in the military, you're on your way out. No matter if you got one day left or 20 years left, eventually everyone who doesn't give their life and serves to the country gets out of the military.
Right. And how many? Remind us, how many years were you in the military?
I was in the military 10 years.
10 years. So
Yeah.
that's
So
yeah. So you were pretty ingrained in that whole society, that culture.
yeah, it's and the longer you're in, obviously, the bigger impact it has on you.
Hmm.
But what a lot of people, and the longer you in, the less chance you have of killing yourself too, which is one of those interesting statistics. Now I'm getting into working in different veteran mental health things, and one of the reasons that I targeted education as my first approach is because people with college degrees don't kill themselves as much. So I
Mhm.
was thinking, okay, what protective factors can we put around veterans? And also people that make more money don't kill themselves as much. So if you go to college, the more you learn, the more you earn type thing. So I really want to help veterans get through their education, and that will help them for a successful life after that.
Your website, can you talk a bit about what's on there and how you continue to add content and what you do?
Yeah, so my website is johnhdaviswriter.com. And on there, I have my book for sale, Combat for College. I also have a student veteran semester journal, which I did as kind of a companion to the book. So my journal, what it does is take you through a classic 16-week semester. So if you're not really interested in necessarily reading the book, but my book is a quick, entertaining read. It's not very long or anything like that. But if you're interested, I have a semester journal on there, and it takes you through your 16 weeks with tips, tricks, there's calendars, there's a monthly budgeting because you have to be able to track your money and all those things like that. And there's also strategies to be successful week to week. On there, I also have a coaching program for student veterans I developed. So if you're interested, if you're in a student veteran program, you're interested in mentoring other student veterans, I developed a coaching program for student veteran to student veteran,
Mhm.
which is one of the things I spoke to Congress about when I went last year. And I also have my blog where I write just general articles about veterans, everything from tattoo therapy for veterans, talking about military tattoos, to student veteran networking, and lots of different articles to help veterans.
Uh, that's Congress. You went and spoke to them. Did you ever think you'd find yourself in that position? And what was that like?
That was actually it was a very growing experience and a big wake up call.
Mhm.
So my idea was I wanted to expand the VA work study program and get more economic opportunities for student veterans during school because like I mentioned, student veterans are more likely to need to work. So I wanted student veterans to be able to work at their school and paid for by the VA. So my idea was to create a paid mentorship program for student veterans, and I kind of saw it working perfectly in my mind. Like a student veteran will come to the school, be mentored by an advanced student veteran who will go through this program to become like a student veteran coach. And then that student veteran will make it up and then, mentor another student veteran, kind of self-repeating program. And I worked really hard on this thing with the Student Veterans of America in DC. And we created this big proposal. I have charts, I have graphs, I have, all this research done for, you know, 20 years of post 9/11 student veteran experiences in college. And by the time I got to actually speak to Congress, I couldn't really get anyone, uh, I would say, to care very much. So I
Okay.
remember meeting this one congresswoman from my home state, and I was so excited because, she was from my home state and everything. And I had this big proposal planned, and I had, all these legislative ideas. I'd written the legislation. Basically, I needed someone to take it forward to put it in a budget.
Yeah.
And the when I sat down with the woman, she said, "Okay, John, I have about 60 seconds, and I got to run." So I had to try, and I was like, "Okay, well, this had taken me like 9 months to get to this
Mhm.
point, from start to all the way here." And I had worked with the Veterans of Foreign Wars legislative team and the Student Veterans of America legislative team, and just to hear that was kind of just heartbreaking. To where I was like,
Yeah.
ah, and that's when I realized that veterans can't rely on people that like that to help us. We can't rely on anything other than ourselves. So it really ingrained in me a sense of personal responsibility and where, okay, I want to work more directly with veterans because I can't put my hopes and dreams on the people in DC, or, I can't put my hopes and dreams on like the VA because they're not going to save you. You have to put your hopes and dreams on yourself.
That's a great segue into what will be a future episode of the Scuttlebutt. We're gonna have some veterans who are representatives onto the program, and as a side question for you, how important do you feel it is that veterans continue like into public service after their service because of issues like this, where they may sit down and understand where you're coming from. I'm guessing that this representative from your home state is not a veteran.
You are
Um,
correct.
yeah, so probably does not have veteran issues top of mind, but also I would hope personally as a person who I'm not a veteran, But I would hope that my representative from my state could sit down with a veteran for more than 60 seconds and say, what do you need? You serve the country. What do veterans need right now?
Right. I think that we have kind of the veteran community has kind of allowed ourselves to become a community living beneath our potential. I think that
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of accepted a lower role in society. And a lot of that's because there's such a big gap between the military and civilian populations that we kind of stay within our isolated bubbles. So I think veterans should really, your service isn't over when you take uniform off. If anything, for me, I feel like my service to the country more accurately began when I got out of the military, because that's when I felt like I was making more of a difference in something that I was passionate about and not something the military was, telling me to do or anything like that. So I would like to see more veterans step up into public service roles and kind of be more of a cultural force. I think that, and we do that a lot of what your organization does was tell veteran stories. If we continue to let Hollywood tell our stories, they'll continue to portray us as, broken, scarred, PTSD filled.
Or
It's
John Wayne, one
yeah,
man army types.
exactly. It's one of the two, which is I've always kind of found that dichotomy interesting to where, we're viewed as like GI Joe, superhuman when we're serving, and as soon as we take the uniform off, we're viewed at, as broken or
Yeah,
homeless or
right.
something to be discarded or whatever. So I think that veterans telling our stories will help a lot in creating a more closer connection to the civilian population.
That's really well put. Thank you for answering that, because that is a bit off subject, but I find it very demoralizing that you only got 60 seconds to talk about this thing that is very important for veterans, and could be a really wonderful resource for someone going into college.
Yeah, and that's, like you mentioned earlier, sometimes I mean disappointments are a part of life, and the veteran experience, you're always going to have setbacks. I mean, nobody said the veteran experience was going to be easy, and that's why veterans need to seek discomfort and not necessarily comfort. You have to keep growing, keep pursuing challenges, keep working post service, uh, and above all, don't give up.
I want to go back to something you said, because I want to hear a little bit more. If you could elaborate a bit more, is that whenever you decided to enlist, it was more about like, okay, community college didn't work out. I'll go join the army because that's something that I could will straighten me out.
Hmm.
Um, but within that, there doesn't seem to be, or at that time, doesn't seem to be this. I want to serve my country, but that identity shift that you found in the military, did that flip a switch in you where whenever you left after 10 years, you were like, I want to continue to serve this country. This is something that has become part of my identity.
Yeah, I think the country for too long has, and myself included, has kind of looked at the military as an option of last resort for American youth.
Yeah.
Like it's just, if if the other things don't work out, you join the military, or like Vietnam, go to war, go to jail. That kind of mentality kind of stays strong. And what happened to me is I fell in love with the people around me. I fell in
Mm.
love with their stories. I mean, no other group besides veterans is, really as diverse in the country. We come from every background, every race, every religion, from every corner of the country, and we're put together and then somehow we make it work. And it really gave me faith, not only in the military and its missions, but also in the overall country, because he took these people. I mean, I remember, my first platoon in Tennessee was just people from every single, corner of the country, and we worked together as a team for a higher mission. And I felt like keeping the idea of having a higher mission of a real purpose in my life was very important post service, so I didn't lose myself, because a lot of veterans really lose themselves when they get out, because they lose that purpose, because they lose that community. So I wanted to build a community around myself and then also keep pursuing something. And yeah, I think it's just I fell in love with the people around me, uh, you know, every day throughout my military career.
Awesome. My last question for you is, the book that Combat to College is, it's not a one-stop shop. Can veterans get in touch with you if they have questions? Is there a way to do that through your website or Twitter, or another avenue to say, hey, I have a couple other questions, would you mind answering them?
Yeah, on my website I have a contact form. I'm also on Instagram as John H. Davis Writer. I do a lot of talks to student veteran groups, kind of around the country, whether through Zoom or real life. So if you'd like me to come, speak to your student veteran organization, or maybe answer questions to help out your program, or if you'd like, my coaching method is for free on my website. So if you're interested in that, that's on there. It has a ton of amazing ideas on how to get through a semester. One of the things that it does do is teach veterans to set goals, because you need goals throughout your academic career. So one thing that I recommended student veterans to do when I was doing coaching is set a physical goal, an emotional goal, a social goal, and an academic goal. So those 4 goals each semester. And then at the end of each semester, or throughout the semester, I'd help veterans reach those goals. So there are a lot of resources on my website, which is a good place to start. And, obviously the book is a tremendous resource for student veterans.
And I would recommend that anybody listening not just YouTube and search for John Davis, because you're going to get a lot of corn references. And that's what I did. I was
Not the
like,
first
I
time I've
wonder if
heard
there's
that. Yeah.
interviews of John. So I put in John Davis, and I'm like, I did not know the lead singer of Corn was Jonathan Davis.
Yeah.
So
And,
there you
there's
go.
another author named John H. Davis as well, but luckily he died a while back. So
Luckily. John, this has been a wealth of information, and thanks for diving into a couple of the rabbit holes with me. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the program. I want to give you the final word if there's anything that you'd like to say to any of our audience members listening in.
yeah, I just, um, gosh, final word. That puts a lot of pressure on me. That's a good question. Well, like I mentioned earlier, school is an excellent place to start for veterans. It really provides an amazing bridge between the military and civilian worlds, but it's so easy to fall off that bridge. And what my book does is take you from one side to the other. And like I mentioned, it's not only about getting a degree and graduating, it's about reaching your potential, because college is an excellent place to grow as a person. And when we get out of the military is not the time to start declining. It's the time to start growing, because now your life is in your own hands and college is an excellent first place. So I want to encourage more veterans to go to school. And if you're on your way there, you might as well pick up my book, because I'll help you get through
See, softball question. You cranked it out of the park. I
it.
expected no less. To our audience, we will have in the descriptions here links to both John's website and his book. We hope you check it out and check out John's many blog posts and different things on the website, which I thoroughly enjoyed. We're very educational as well. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. John, thank you again for joining us on the Scuttlebutt. I hope to have you on the program again.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank both of our sponsors, the first being D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s, but they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D. That's D&D Autosalvage.com. Thank you so much to D&D. They've been a sponsor for quite some time, and we really appreciate their support. The second being tobacco-free Adagio Health. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit, and they have classes and nicotine replacement therapy and a popular quit line, which is the easiest number to remember ever, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Finally, tobacco-free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all of what tobacco-free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org, or you can watch our recent episode with tobacco-free Adagio Health on the Scuttlebutt, where they talk about a lot of the programs that they offer for those who are looking to quit. Thank you to both of our sponsors for their continued support of the Scuttlebutt podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks.